Hey guys, so this is a continuation still of discussion in chapter 1, Introduction to Bioethics. Now this slide talks about what are the critical concerns that has gone through over the years. So one concern there is human experimentation. Now when I say human experimentation, that's doing experiments among us, humans. Now at present, what's the prerequisite? Guys, the big question here that always comes in is that uh, the drug studies, no? The studies about medications, the studies about drugs. Now, the common concern here that comes in is this. No? When is it suitable to conduct studies among humans? And guys, the current answer to that is that you can only conduct studies among humans if you have done already animal studies. Okay, you have done already animal studies. And then that animal studies have found that the drug has possible benefit. Okay, so the example that I would usually say is that if you found that all of the animals died during the experiment, do not proceed to the human studies. If you found that the animals which were subject to the drug studies had a lot of complications, do not proceed to the human studies. Okay, so before you do human studies, you need to be able to ensure that there is some benefit as shown in the animal studies. Next, discovery of genetics. Now, the question class of genetics would come in actually on, is it still human or is it still God? Okay, so it's about a question of, are we acting like humans or are we acting like God? Because genetics would entail that we will be modifying things in the genetic makeup. So for example, if you've heard of genetically modified organisms, so your GMOs, genetically modified organisms, you are already encountering plants and animals which are genetically modified. Now, in other words, for example, among crops, they would genetically modify rice, which is capable of resisting a certain type of pest. No? And then in animals, they would genetically modify animals to remove the abnormal genes or to remove the problematic gene. So the critics there are usually asking, are you acting like God or is it still human to do it? And up to what extent can we modify the genes? Because modifying the genes would also have its consequences. It has its benefit and it also has its consequences. One of the consequences is that it will be able to damage the genomic makeup of many people for the succeeding years. No? So we do not know. Or for example, if naka-develop siya resistance sa pest, the one that I mentioned on the crop, no? The crop that develop resistance to the pest, it will come a time that another pest will be able to develop resistance also to that plant. So it's as if that we're making our enemies more severe and more talented. So that's the question that is being raised by genetics. Now, organ transplant. No? The question on organ transplant is, when can we do transplant? When can we do transplant? So if you have any idea, can we do kidney transplant, guys? Can we do kidney transplant? Sige nga, students. Okay, let me see. There was a chat. Okay, can we do it among living donors? Let's say, for example, buhi pa ang donor, and then I will be having the kidney transplant. Can it be done? Sige na, your ideas. Para nga you will be able to know kung ano kakatabo sa transplantation. What do you think? Pwede nga buhi pa ang donor, buhay pa yung donor. Pagkatapos you will give the kidney to another patient. Is that possible, guys? What do you think?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Yes, possible. No? Okay, let's talk about liver. Liver. Is it okay to donate a liver from a living donor? Others na. What are your idea? I would want to hear your voices or your chat here. What do you think? Can you donate a liver from a living donor? Your ideas, guys?
Yes, sir.
Pwede. Okay, that's correct. How about heart? If I will be donating the heart, does it need from a living donor or from a cadaver already? Sige na. Impossible sa heart. Trisha is sending me a message. It's impossible for the heart to be living, but can I do heart transplant from somebody who's dead? Can I do heart transplant from somebody who's dead? Okay, yes. Okay, Christian is actually right. You can do it. You can do it if somebody's dead, of course. Now, the ethical question there naman that next comes in is who will be able to benefit with the heart? So for example, in the US, guys, they already have their organ transplant registry. No? So organ transplant registry. When I say organ transplant registry, that's a nationwide listing. Okay, that's a nationwide listing of all those who need transplant. Now, for example, patient A needs heart. She's number 1 on the list. Patient number 10 also needs a heart. Now, guys, it would depend if who would be getting the benefit. For example, someone who died is about the size of patient number 10. So patient number 10 would be the one to receive it. Or if someone who died is nearer to patient number 20, patient number 20 would be able to receive it. So what I mean is that even though if there is a list from 1 to 1,000, it is not always the top one who will be taken on the list. No? But it depends also on different circumstances. So sometimes they would need to do cross-matching, they would need to do matching of the physical body, matching of the diseases, and the like. Okay, so that's one of the ethics in organ transplant. And even also, guys, in organ transplant, take note that the management does not actually end by the time that you were transplanted something. Let's say, for example, kidney transplant. No? Your kidney actually does not automatically heal by the time you have the new kidney. And it does not mean that you will stop already taking medications. So oftentimes, the ethical question there is, who will receive the transplant in terms of finances? Is it somebody who is poor or somebody who is rich? Diba? That would come naman into your mind, sir, are we prioritizing the rich over the poor? Are we prioritizing the poor over the rich? But that's not actually the basic question that you should ask. Okay, you should ask in your minds, who is capable of maintaining the medications? Who is capable of maintaining the medications? Come to look at the picture. If I will give it to somebody who is poor, and then that person will not be able to maintain the medications, what would happen? That kidney would just be useless. Okay, that kidney would just be useless. But if I will give it to somebody who is financially able to do it, okay, she will be able to live with that kidney and then she will be able to maintain the kidney. Okay, so why I'm telling you that? I'm not telling you to give it to the rich, to give it to the poor. But when you are dealing with your patients, you need to orient them of the possible consequences. And you as a nurse would need to assess whether your patient was able to understand it or not. Okay? Okay, oftentimes, di ba, for example, you're sick. No? Example, think of yourself that you had an acute illness. Di ba, ang tendency is that you will look for an immediate remedy. Okay, you will look for an immediate remedy, mambal ka nga, hindi, dapat makuha ako gid, dapat maayo gid ako, no? I need to find means for me to get well. But sometimes you do not think of the consequences of your actions. So as nurses, we need to make sure that our patients was able to understand it. If they were not able to understand it, who's the best person to explain it? Is it us as nurses or is it the physician? Who do you think? Sige na, your response please. Sige na. Okay. So on that point, guys, no, it will be the physician. It is actually them who is licensed to do the explanation for this one. Okay? Because, guys, the physicians are already oriented. The physicians are actually already trained to say, for example, nga, ma'am, if you will have the transplant, the success rate is 20%. Ma'am, if you have the transplant, you need to spend 200 pesos per day for the maintenance medications. Okay? Example statements lang na those are not really facts. Na. But I hope you're getting the point. Next, number 4, the beginning of life and human procreation. Actually, this concern is addressing the question of abortion. This concern is addressing the question of abortion. Okay? Now, kumbaga, the question is, when does life really begin? When does life really begin? Is it on the 12th week wherein there is already fetal heart rate? Or is it by the time that the egg cell would meet the sperm cell? And then in the process that we refer to as fertilization. Okay, so when does life begin? And the question there is, when can you end it? No? Can you end it by the time of fertilization? Or can you end it by the time that the patient is less than 12 weeks? Or hindi na pwedeng nga 20 weeks siya because life is already there. Okay, so those are some of the questions that needs to be answered when it comes to abortion. If you will take my point, I'm actually happy that here in the Philippines, abortion is not normalized. No? But there are different aspects to it. There are different aspects to it. As I've mentioned, when we look at an ethical problem, we do not just look at one side of it. So if you would look at in other countries, there are actually reasons why they do abortion. For example, in the USA, if they found out that the child has a genetic abnormality wherein the child will suffer for a lifetime, they would opt for abortion because they don't want that the child would suffer. They also don't want that their family would suffer because of that family member. Okay? There are things like that now. So it's not just basically abortion. And then I don't know if you've heard of morning after pill. One of the questions also in ethics is that, is the morning after pill recommended? Okay? What's a morning after pill? The morning after pill is usually the question that you will encounter if there was an inadvertent sexual contact, wherein, for example, the victim was raped. Na-rape siya, Abby, for example, during the time that she is ovulating, and then she does not want to get pregnant and to carry the child. So the morning after pill would actually prevent fertilization, or the morning after pill would dissolve the product of fertilization if ever it occurred a night before or a day before. That's why it's referred to as morning after pill, because it's best to be taken the morning after you had sex. No? So that is within 24 hours supposedly. So the question is it ethical? Is it ethical for us to do it? Is it ethical for physicians to prescribe it? So, diba, if you have heard of arguments in abortion and things like this, the question is always, is it pro-life or is it pro-choice? Now, is it pro-life or is it pro-choice? So, I'm not actually taking sides there because there are different sides to it. So, it's up to us. No? It's actually up to us whether we will make the decision or not. But as your teacher in nursing, I would like to remind you that abortion is still illegal in Philippines. So if somebody, for example, would go to a, let's say, hidden clinic, and then will tell you, nurse, please assist me. I will be doing an abortion. You are not supposed to assist because that is an illegal act, and that could actually mean losing your license. That could actually mean losing your license. You might be thinking, sir, I'm just helping the victim. She does not want to get pregnant. But you know what, guys? By the time that this victim would have massive bleeding due to incomplete abortion, and by the time that she would go to the hospital, now questions will be raised. Where did you do it? How did it happen? And along the way, your name might appear, and guys, rest assured, you will be losing your license. Okay, so don't do it. You know it's illegal, so don't do it. Okay, I know there are moves right now to make it legal, but of course, that will not be legal for everybody. So there will be parameters if ever that would happen. Okay, so next, end of life issues. Now, the question on end of life issues is, who decides at the end of life? Who decides at the end of life? Okay? Siguro ang mas masayang example dyan is that when somebody is dying and then somebody is crying, no? For example, a man is dying and then somebody is crying hard at the bedside, and then by the time you will ask, Ma'am, what's the decision? Oftentimes I would hear the response, Sir, hindi po ako yung legal wife. Sir, hindi po ako ang legal wife. Okay, so nurses, be careful with that. I've already heard from colleagues here in the locality, here in Iloilo, wherein guys that they thought all the while that who is visiting the patient is actually the wife. But it turns out to be the kabit, no? Not the legal wife. So be careful. Even though class that they are together for 5 years, 10 years, remember it is still the legal wife who can call the shots. It is still the legal wife who can call the shots. So please be careful. And when you're asking somebody to sign the document, Make sure, guys, that their last name is the same. It will do you no harm if you will ask for an identification card of this individual. Okay? So what are the possible end-of-life issues? 1+ is your DNR. Your do not resuscitate. Okay? Do not resuscitate. So in other words, who signs this? Because the patient is unable to decide already. So you need to identify who are the immediate family members. Then, our remedy class for the end of life issues is usually the appointment of your living will, or no, the making actually of your living will. And then another one is the appointment of your healthcare proxy. Okay? So living will, when I say class living will, it will indicate no, what will be my decision if ever I will become unconscious. What do I want to happen if ever I will become unconscious? Okay? So those are outlined in your living will. And when I say healthcare proxy, it means I, Helbert John, do hereby appoint person A to be the one to decide in case I will be unconscious, in case I will be in a state of coma, or in case I will be unable to decide. Now, plus the healthcare proxy could actually appoint somebody. It does not need to be your mother. It does not need to be your wife or your children later on. Okay, it could be somebody. For example, best friend ko si Bien. Okay, I will tell Bien, whenever happens to me, you will be the one to decide. So guys, even though if my wife, even though if my sister, my brother, my children, even though my best friend is there, they don't have a choice because Bien will be the one to decide. Okay? Healthcare proxy is now gaining popularity in our country. No? In the past, when I was still studying this way back, my undergraduate, I have not seen patients who would opt for this. But right now, I have seen a lot of patients already who have living will and then healthcare proxy. Guys, if there is such document, make sure that it is endorsed on the top of the chart. Okay, for example, guys, no, DNR, if your patient was placed in DNR, pagkatapos ikaw na nurse, very excited to resuscitate your patient, for example, guys, you would not actually be seen as somebody who is helping. Instead, you will be seen somebody who is not following the law. Okay, so be careful. Not all arrest patients you need to resuscitate because some of them actually opted already to rest their case. So those are some of the end-of-life issues that we are encountering. As you can notice, along the way, I'm presenting to you remedies to these issues or concerns. Okay? And if you can notice, the best approach is still individualized. The best approach, class, is that it should still be individualized. Okay? I could not generalize, for example, that all patient needs healthcare proxy, all patient needs living will. No, it should be individualized. As nurses of the future, one thing maybe that I could tell you is that, okay, this is just a personal tip on the side. This is not on your textbook or any discussion. But maybe one thing that you can do is to start already talking to your parents if whatever their plan is, whenever they will be in that situation wherein they will become unconscious, they will be unable to decide. Okay? You know why? It will save you a lot of burden later on whenever you will be facing that situation. Because sometimes, this is a research actually done by my student in master's. It shows that there is actually difference in how the family would want the end of life care would be compared to that of the patient. This was a study conducted among cancer patients. No? So ano guys ang tendency? The patient would already want to rest. The patient would actually already want to give up. But then the family members are still aggressive. No? So the family members would still want CPR. The family members would want emergency drugs. Whereas the patient plus is actually saying, tama na, ayaw ko na. Okay? So one thing, no, for you to possibly prepare for that ethical dilemma, try to ask already your old adults, okay, your lola, lolo, and maybe class your parents, if you can open that conversation with them, that would be a good way for you to start. So we are going back to the interpretation of bioethics. So again, guys, when I say bioethics, it is a systematic study of moral dimensions, including the moral vision, decision, okay, and then conduct and policies of life. and science and healthcare employing a variety of ethical methodologies in an interdisciplinary setting. If you would look at the definition, that's long, but it simply reminds you that it's systematic. Systematic. Hindi pwede na I will wake up and then say, okay, I support abortion. Hindi pwede that I will wake up and say, I support end of life care. So it needs to be a process. That's why in most of the hospitals, we already have your ethics committee that would decide in difficult situations like this. Okay? Now, next, your bioethics may also be sometimes referred to as relativistic. When I say relativistic, look at the word relativistic, relativistic. Meaning it cannot be understood as a comparison of different opinions and various positions. Okay? Hindi siya pwede na it's just black and white. No, we could not just say it's good and bad. If you can notice in my discussion, even medications, there are side effects. So as nurses, as healthcare professionals, we need to weigh whether the benefits would outweigh the risk. So hindi pwede na, I'll opt for option A because option A is all good. In healthcare, guys, there is no such remedy. There is no such option as all good. There is always consequences to the actions that we are making. That's why we say that bioethics may be relative. What may be true in this situation may not actually be true to another situation. And then other than that, effective decision-making approaches would provide objective answers based on rationally valid criteria. Okay, so we have a criteria that we are using. Now, bioethics class is also considered as a critical conscience of technological civilization. What do we mean by that? A lot is already happening in this world. Okay? Computers, robots, all of those updates are there. But bioethics is offering us conscience. Bioethics is taking us to the question, is what I'm doing still ethical? Is what I'm doing good? Is what I'm doing suitable? No? So kindly take note of that. So we still need to you still need to evaluate whether these responses will be correct or not. Okay, so you have that conscience. Now, what are the 4 areas of bioethics competency? Okay, what are the 4 areas of bioethics competency? 1, ethical problem in the healthcare profession. Okay, so ethical problem in the healthcare profession. Second, ethical problems arise in the field of humans, even if it's not directly therapeutic. Third, social problems are connected with national and international public health policy. So sometimes, the tendency is that we think a lot what to do with this problem. But then you fail to realize that there are laws, there are governances, there are issuances in the government that would tell you what to do. Then there are problems related to interventions on the other living things. So as I mentioned, animals, we already have animal rights advocate. So we could not just say, let's conduct the study among animals, let them die. No, hindi man pwedeng ganon. So before we conduct the study among animals, we need actually to conduct the study in the laboratory setting. Okay, because in the laboratory setting, you will be able to determine whether it will be harmful or not for the animals. Okay, in the same thing, plants. Look at plants. There are actually ethical questions about plants. Okay, for example, marijuana. If I'm not mistaken, in the United Kingdom, you're allowed to grow a little amount of marijuana. You're allowed to grow a little marijuana plant. Okay, what's the purpose of marijuana? Do you have any idea what's the purpose of marijuana, guys? Anong purpose ng marijuana? Sige na, anybody? Cluster marijuana is actually useful. Yes, Trisha?
Sometimes, sir, it can use in comes to medication, sir.
Yes, it can be used as medication. So guys, commonly pain medication. It is actually used as a pain medication. So it's a good pain medication for patient who has end-stage cancer. So in the UK, you can grow a little marijuana plant, and then you can use that as a medication. to relieve your pain experience. Okay, so kindly take note of that. Now, what are the subdivisions of bioethics? So you have general bioethics, particular bioethics, and then their clinical bioethics. Now, when I talk about general bioethics, these are ethical formulations, discussion of values first, principles, documentary sources. When I talk about particular bioethics, it's a specific field. That's why it's referred to as particular. Okay, it's more specific. And when I talk about clinical bioethics, it's the application of theories to concrete clinical settings. That's why it's referred to as clinical bioethics. Okay? Now, another word perhaps that I would want you to be familiar of is the Hippocratic Oath. The Hippocratic Oath is actually more common among the physicians. Now, if you can recall, it is from Hippocrates, actually, the first physician, Hippocrates. So you have the Hippocratic Oath. Right now, the doctors are still reciting the Hippocratic Oath. This is still part of their practices to recite the Hippocratic Oath. But of course, it's a revised version already. If you can see, no, the writing would say, I swear by Apollo, Asclepius, Hygia, Panacea, these are still Greek gods. No? And by all gods and goddesses, making them my witness that I will carry out this oath into my indenture. So, mga old na siya nga words. No? But right now, there's a current version that is still used. Basically, the Hippocratic Oath says that you will not do anything that will harm your patient. You will be doing everything that will do good to your patient. And if ever that nothing can be done to your patient, you will assist your patient towards peaceful death. Okay? So guys, by assessing patients or by assisting patients to peaceful death, that does not mean you will give them medications to die, but you ensure that that their death will be comfortable. Okay, so these are among the oldest write-ups that are available in ethics that are still used. Your Hippocratic. Okay, do you have any questions so far?